People who caught their significant others cheating? How did you do that? And what was your reaction? My ex was a heavy drinker, and I wasn't. She would frequent this bar close to our place pretty often with her friends. I rarely went because I just wasn't a fan of bars or her drinking friends. One night she went out with a couple that I didn't mind that much. I was bored at home, so I decided to head over for a bit. When I walked in, I saw my ex sitting at the bar with the couple. The place was packed, and as soon as we made eye contact, she had this strange look on her face. She turns to this guy sitting next to her, and he immediately gets up and leaves. I felt something strange right away, but I brushed it off as me being irrational. I stayed for about an hour and then headed home. However, I couldn't shake the feeling I had though, so I checked one of her friends' Facebook pages to see if there was any connection that existed between my ex and this random dude. Sure enough, he was friends with one of my ex's friends. I knew his name now and knew that I wasn't as crazy as I thought. I sat on the information though. The next weekend, she goes out drinking again and still had not returned home at 4 a.m. I tried contacting her multiple times and I got no response. I woke up to her coming home at 7 a.m. and jumping in the shower immediately. While she was in there, I checked her phone and found all her messages with the same guy. There was some pretty telling information in the conversation. While she was still showering, I grabbed a fresh pair of clothes and headed to my best friend's house. 20 minutes later, I get a phone call with her freaking out about me leaving and not saying anything. I laughed at her projection and told her that if she wasn't moved out by Monday, the police would be there to force her out. She wasn't on the lease and her parents lived 10 minutes away from me. That was the end of it. I owned a house with my fiance. I woke up in the middle of the night and he wasn't in bed. I went searching. His truck and another vehicle were in the driveway. Then I went upstairs and found the guest bedroom was locked. After barging my way in, I found him with another woman in bed. That bed happened to be my childhood bed. He forced me out of the room, literally grabbed me by the neck and pushed me out and closed the door back. I knew I couldn't do anything at that point, so I called his parents who lived a few blocks away. His dad showed up and another fight broke out. I ended up leaving and staying at his parents until dawn. I moved out that weekend and let the house foreclose. 9 years later, it's finally off my credit report. I'm happily married to an amazing man, and we own a beautiful home together. This first started back in December, right before we went on a holiday trip to see my family. She started acting somewhat off, kind of distant, and easily aggravated. I had a suspicion that something was going on, and I'm embarrassed to admit that I snooped on her iWatch. Found some incriminating texts she had with a friend, so I confronted her in January. She tells me that she kissed a guy that she works with, and that was it. We were having some issues in our relationship, and I choose to forgive her, and we decided to try working on some of the issues we were having. Well, fast forward to a few months later, she breaks down that she wasn't honest with me and that she had actually had sex with this other dude. We split after the news. We had been together 8 years and had been engaged for almost 2 years. I used to live in a house with my best friend and my girlfriend. One night, while I was working at the pub, I got a phone call from my best friend on the work phone, as I don't answer my personal phone while I'm working. He told me that after coming home from having a few drinks with his colleagues, he found my now ex-girlfriend in bed with another man. My friend, being completely wasted, decided that he didn't like that and wound up throwing some naked Indian guy down the stairs and beating the hell out of him once he reached the bottom. I immediately rushed home from work to find the police at the door with the Indian guy in the back of the cop car, wearing his boxer shorts and handcuffs, being attended to by a medic. My mate was sitting in the front room talking to the other officer. He was let off with a caution, as it was an understandable reaction even though he was drunk. I'm honestly so glad to say that he still lives with me, because otherwise I would have never found out. I was working with my ex at a place that also provided accommodation, but we had separate rooms. One night we were having drinks with some other people, and I went to bed early because I wasn't feeling well. In the middle of the night, I wake up to a girl moaning and immediately knew my ex was involved. So I get on the hallway but can't locate where the noise is coming from, but it's definitely not my ex's room. I end up wandering around for almost an hour. Unfortunately, that made me even more sure it's my ex, but couldn't figure out where they were. I got so nervous and angry I started throwing up. So the next day I asked my ex if he heard anything. He said no, he went to bed not long after me. I decided not to confront him, and instead of trusting my gut, I started believing I'm turning into a crazy jealous girlfriend. I even thought that maybe it was all in my head. We broke up about a week after for different reasons. I moved away and told him not to contact me. A few months after, I'm doing great, and he starts messaging me, and after realizing that I'm doing fine without him, he confesses that he was cheating on me several times during our relationship, even with friends of mine. Turns out that night they were having sex basically under my window, during winter. That's how I learned to trust my own gut and why to get out of abusive relationships. Many years ago, got in a minor argument with my girlfriend. She insisted on going to stay at her father's, but I wanted her to stay so we could work through it. She left and I couldn't sleep, so very early in the morning I decided to go there and just take all blame and apologize. I walked into the spare room to wake her up and she's laying there with some dude. I went back upstairs and sat at the table for a few minutes and saw a hammer sitting on the table at arm's reach. I picked it up and went back to the bedroom and stood there for a few seconds in shock and slammed the hammer as hard as I could against the headboard. You can imagine their wake-up reaction. I looked at her and said, "We're done." Looked at him and said, "That could have been you." And I went home to bed. Edit. Girlfriend and I were together for about 4 years when this happened. Hanging out with my boyfriend one day, I saw a message thread while he was on his computer where he gave his Snapchat to a group of friends. I noticed it was not the same Snapchat I had for him. I didn't say anything at that moment, but remembered the username. Since seeing it, I had a terrible feeling. Later, I decided to try to log into his account, and voila, the same password he used for everything worked. I immediately saw hundreds of chats with different women, multiple unopened messages from just the past few hours, and a ridiculous Snapchat score. I scrolled through the many messages and realized this dated back for around 3 years. We had been dating for 4 to 5 years. I even found messages and dates from my birthdays and our anniversaries. Days where he spent the entire day with me and still managed to do this behind my back. I called him and demanded he come talk to me. He drove over and I got in his car and confronted him. He panicked and immediately started apologizing. I was young and livid, took his phone and drove to my best friend's house. There, I looked through his phone and found he had signed up for every dating app site available, messages with multiple women on all of them. He even responded to local Craigslist ads asking for sex. He even bothered to ask if they were clean. I found a secret email account too, and tons of nudes of girls in there. I'm sure there was more, but by then I had seen enough. He desperately tried to redeem himself, changed his number, cleared his phone and got a shitty little flip phone. But you can't come back from that kind of damage. I had absolutely no idea too. He never did anything sketchy. We rarely fought. I was so in love with him. Turns out, of course, he was just great at hiding everything. I never saw it coming and the weight of it all absolutely crushed me.